This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, whenever you're ready, Don.
Thanks. Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome everyone to the curtain raiser for our SEC conference on Saturday, and to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Amelia Brown, who is an honorary senior research fellow from Macquarie University and visiting senior associate member of the American School of Classical Studies at Athens. So it's great to have Amelia here tonight. She's given a number of very, very interesting talks over a number of years for our SEC conference. And Amelia comes to us from Malta tonight. So welcome, Amelia, and we look forward to your paper.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me all right? Just, I'll, that, is my screen there?
Yes.
Yep.
It says kinswoman in Jesus's life, tomb and
Yep,
afterlife. You got that?
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep, and then if I go like this, does it change?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
not on my now. Yes.
Yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
there we go. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So, thank you again, then. Thank you so much for having me and for inviting me to have this curtain raiser and to present this curtain raiser to you for the conference for SSEC or SEC this year. Do let me know afterwards if you have any questions, and I'd be very happy to lead a bit of discussion and answer them to the best of my ability. Although I must admit that this is a later period of time, or rather an earlier period of time and a later period of time, because it's been really fascinating to find out some of the stories, both of the gospel, of the gospels, and especially, though, also some of the stories of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance that relate to the kinswomen of Jesus. So today, of course, almost everyone, and surely everyone in this group, has heard about the Virgin Mary, or Greek Parthenos, Maria, the Theotokos in Greek, or bearer of God. Maria, Miriam, Mariam, its variants, like the English name Mary, is one of the most widespread and abundant female names in the world. And Joseph, the carpenter of Nazareth of the house of David, has also loaned his name to many, many men. He's especially popular here in Malta, where I'm speaking to you from today. And yet, the ladies of Jesus' ancient Jewish family of the Galilee also loom very, very large in the Gospels, especially the Gospels of Luke and John. Jesus' mother, Maria's own kinswoman, or auntie or cousin, her Syngenes, Elizabeth, bore John the Baptist, or forerunner, who then grew up to baptize his younger cousin Jesus in the Jordan River. Their common great grandmother, or perhaps great auntie, the sister of Anna, or the mother of Anna, and Elizabeth is said to be Maria, and in a medieval or Renaissance legend became a saint of widows in Italy, and made her own miracle multiplying fishes to feed her almost certainly fictional hospice on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Normans consecrated their first church at the Grand Harbor Fortress of Malta to St. Anne, mother of Maria Panagia Theotokos, and her sisters and brothers. And she and her husband, Joachim, developed their own set of stories as Mariolatry grew across the western to southern Mediterranean coasts and beyond to Ethiopia or Ireland. So, in conclusion, it seems that many or even most of the Marys and other women attending on Jesus, both before and after his death, burial, and resurrection, were, or at least later became, his aunties, as we might understand them today, either in the biological, familial, or cultural sense in modern Australia and the English-speaking world more broadly. Now, Jesus' family, friends, and followers thus included many women, and what we could call his kinswomen, besides his probably apocryphal wife, which I don't have time to get into in this talk. These women, these kinswomen, were related to him either via his mother Mary or through his mortal father Joseph, her husband. And this family of women included women making a difference in their own worlds, in the world of many millions of women who came to read and hear about them afterwards, as well as men who today learn still from their wisdom, miracles, and life stories. So I am going to speak to you today, first with a little bit of introductory material about archaeology and biblical and early Christian evidence for the women in Jesus' life, from his grandmother and possibly great-grandmother to his aunties and cousins, and then in-laws, and suggest a few ways in which we might reconstruct this family, this community of kinswomen and men in ancient Greco-Roman and Second Temple Jewish Nazareth. What was their home, family, and community context? I will then continue with some of the important tales, both written and in pictures, of Jesus' kinswomen in the development of Christian art, literature, and wider family-based societies. And it's worth remembering that all of these societies, both Jewish and Greco-Roman cultures, as well as later on the Christian cultures of the Middle Ages and up to today, were all once very foreign to one another and to first century Nazareth, Judea, and Palestine, the eastern shore of the Mediterranean and the roughly contemporary Roman Empire for many, many centuries thereafter. As time went on and these stories were read and reinterpreted and translated, of course, some things remained constant, such as, women and men bearing children, raising them together, but many different kinds of households and many different kinds of family relationships were enumerated and were drawn, were painted, were otherwise expressed, right? From the French medieval coast to Renaissance Florence. But in conclusion, I hope very much to show you a bit about how kinswomen of Jesus in Bible stories and in subsequent stories, from the three Marys at the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem to Saint Anne and Saint Ismaria, continue to shape Christianity and our understanding of early Christianity today. Thank you for inviting me again to open this year's SSCC Conference on Jesus, Family, Friends, and Followers. So to start with this brief kind of overview of their cultural, familial environment, we start then with the Hellenistic Galilee, and particularly with the environment around the Galilee and around the cities of Nazareth, Capernaum, Tiberias, a world that was kind of on the border between Hellenistic Judaism of Greek speakers and the world of the Hebrew Bible, and especially those books that have been translated into both Greek and Aramaic. And so it's both the Greek and Aramaic speaking place where there are many people who are Jewish, the majority Jewish probably in Galilee, but then there's also, they are in touch with the center, their center in Jerusalem and the temple, but they're also in touch with the diaspora, the Jews who live among the Greeks, and to a lesser extent, the Romans to the west, such as on the island of Delos right here. So we can get an idea of this kind of Second Temple Judaism at a little bit of a remove from the very well-preserved Dura Europa synagogue of the early 3rd century in eastern Syria, and the enormous amount of wall paintings that survived, which are now some in Syria Damascus Museum and some in Yale's art gallery. And then some statuary as well of contemporary polytheistic Dura Europos, which is now either in the Louvre or again at Yale. So this was a very generally outside of the Jews, polytheistic society with many different kinds of female deities, both nude and clothed, queens and daughters and mothers and mother goddesses as well. For example, in Egypt, where Pharaoh's daughter is supposed to have found Moses, and there was also the very strong tradition of Isis worship at this time. So there were, however, important female exempla in the Jewish tradition. Think of not just Eve or Zoe in Greek, but later on Esther and Ruth, of course, and the many other women of the Old Testament for the Christians. So this was a society right on the border of Phoenicia, of Tyre and Sidon, modern Lebanon, a place famous for their powerful mother goddesses, especially Astarte Aphrodite, as she was by that point. This is a coin showing her temple in Tyre in the 2nd century, and this is the famous slipper slapper Aphrodite Astarte that was dedicated by a Posidoniast, or a devotee of Poseidon, from Beirut in his clubhouse on the island of Delos. Right. So there's in the time of Jesus' immediate kinswomen, this is a time when the temple is still at the center of Jewish life, and it's the 2nd temple of Cyrus, rebuilt by King Herod with greater glory, which has been restored in myriad ways, but basically was on Temple Mount on the east side of Jerusalem, and which was would be sacked by the Romans in 70 and never rebuilt. So it is there is a changeover then, and certainly in the traditions of the kin of Jesus and of the kinfolk of Jesus, both women and men. This is a big break. But the temple continues to live on, of course, in the stories that are told, not just about Jesus in the Gospels, but also by the further works that were developed over the years, such as the story of Mary's presentation in the temple, which is honored in the feast of 21st November, and wonderful little icons like this created in the Eastern tradition. So the Galilee was a place of small towns, inland towns like Nazareth, and coastal towns like Capernaum, of fishermen and farmers, which we know about not just from the Gospels and archaeology, but also from the works of Josephus, who provides a wonderful excursus on it in his Jewish War. And he tells us that it's a place of fishermen and farmers, that it is a very well-peopled place, and that it is small, but full of fighters from the cradle, and at all times numerous in people. Never a place of cowards or a declining population, an area excellent for crops or cattle, rich in forests of every kind, and thickly cultivated, with not a corner left to waste, especially cultivated in the many plants, but especially the olive, vine, and palm trees. And of course, the fishermen, loom large in Jesus' ministry, and the fisherwomen too. And this boat, this ancient fishing boat, was even found on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, and preserved by Shelley Waxman in a modern museum. But there were definitely important differences between women and men's lives around the Sea of Galilee. And it was a place, again, rich in date palms, in olive groves, in vineyards and in grain fields. And all of these would have been cultivated by both men and women and large families, as many children as possible, basically working together. And we can get an idea of the everyday life of both men and women in this area from looking at the wedding at Cana in John 2, 1 through 11, and also in the other miracles of the loaves and the fishes and their proliferation. But this particular famous episode from the Bible says that there was a marriage at Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited with all his disciples. And when the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "O woman, what have you to do with me? My hour has not yet come." And his mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And there were 6 stone jars standing there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons of water. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars up with water." They filled them to the brim, and he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the steward of the feast." And they took it out, and when the steward of the feast tasted the water now become wine and didn't know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward of the feast called the bridegroom and said, "Every man serves the good wine first, when men have drunk freely than the poor wine, but now you have kept the good wine until now." Wow. And this was the first of his signs that Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him, etc. But I think what's really interesting about this is not just the importance of wine and water to the feast, but also the special role that Jesus' mother plays here. She goes to the feast and therefore also brings along Jesus and his disciples. And we can imagine that this was a family affair, right? And so many, many kinswomen and men would be there. And this was a special event, right? So women's world would be of their family and their tribe from birth and many births, which they would probably be expected to have from the time that they were in their late teens until they were in their sort of 30s or so. And also caring for the dead. There was a special role for women in Judaism for caring for the dead. And so we can see this a little bit in the story of Mary, but also indirectly in the stories of Jesus' kinswomen. So we should imagine then that there's a kind of inner life of women among themselves and with their families and in their households, but there is also contact with the outside world, of course, and with men, even men not of their families, particularly at wells when seeking water, which is really important for them all, and also for various other purposes too, that women would go out, of course, to festivals, to weddings, sometimes to Jerusalem, to the temple for the different Jewish holy days. Right. Now, I want to also put a caveat here and not, read you all of these, but Jesus also twice in most of the Gospels directly rebukes his family ties for his ties of discipleship instead. So you have in Matthew and in Mark, and then also in Luke as well, in Luke 8:19, where his mother and brothers are outside, but he says, "Oh, what is it, with me? I'm just, going to see as family, as brothers and sisters, as mother even, these people here, my disciples, those who do the work of the kingdom of heaven." So there's a lot of different steps, right, in Jesus' ministry, and there's a lot of different communications too from him about his mothers and brothers, and his relationship with Nazareth too, which in the second set of passages also is for Luke again. It's Luke 4:22, where a number of people question, isn't this Joseph's son? And these, and then he's not honored among his family or among his people, right? Okay, but that having been said, there's definitely a very robust tradition of Jesus' family, friends, and followers during his lifetime and afterwards as well. He is said to have Adelphoi numerous times. These are interpreted as brothers by another mother, Joseph's first wife in the East, and as his cousins by St. Jerome and in the Latin-speaking West. There are also multiple references to his sisters being present and having been born, basically. There's this criticism, right? But the criticism usually mentions that he has 4 brothers, including James, Jacob, and then that brother, or let's say cousin, takes on an important key role in Jerusalem and in the Christian community after Jesus' death and resurrection. Clopas is also said to be Joseph's brother, and so Simeon, who takes over after James, Jesus' cousin, and there are many references in very early Christian texts to many kinsmen of Jesus. Some of the most specific is that Eusebius quotes this letter of Africanus to Aristides, saying that both Joseph and Mary descended from the house of David, and that the Savior's human relations give this account and are called the Desposini, that is, the people of the despotis, right? So the people of the master, on account of their relationship to the Savior's family. So we should imagine that certainly through the first century and probably beyond, there were people who were thought to be direct relatives, kinsfolk of Jesus, still part of the early Christian community. And primary among these in the accounts that we have in the Gospel of Luke is the story of Maria's kinswoman, or in the Greek, it's Maria's. She's called Elisabeth. He Singenisu, that is Elizabeth. Her relative, and that could be aunt or sister or cousin, most likely cousin generally, and her husband, Zachariah. And so at the very beginning of Luke's gospel, Luke chooses to have a kind of second annunciation story, a doublet a bit, which has an announcement, but this case, the angel Gabriel comes to Zachariah in the temple, strikes him dumb, and tells him that there not only will be a child, a son, but that he should be called John, and that he will grow up to be great. And then, of course, the traditional annunciation that is present elsewhere comes to Maria, and she goes to visit her kinswoman, and eventually the baby is born. There's the leaping in the womb before that, of course, which is recorded in many famous paintings, and also in the Magnificat, great hymn. So finally, he is only called John the Baptist eventually when his mother says so, and his father writes it down, and therefore gets the growth, the gift of prophecy, right? And then the child, that is John the Baptist, grew and became strong in spirit and was in the deserts until he came to Israel, right? So A much less well-known story, however, is Great Granny Ismeria. I had actually not heard much about her until I started this project, but in at least two manuscripts from Renaissance Florence, 14th century MS Panciatiano 40, and 15th century MS 1052, a scholar named Catherine Lawless at the University of Limerick in the Journal of Medieval History in 2010 illuminated for scholarly and then actually more popular audiences too, the vernacular Latin to Italian tradition of Ismeria. So according to this vernacular Italian legend in at least these two manuscripts and perhaps more, they have not been fully edited. Ismeria is a daughter of Nabo, of the people of Judea, of the tribe of King David, married to a certain Saint Lysios, who is described as a patriarch of the people of God. She is not, as in the more well-known traditions, sister of Saint Anne and grandmother of Saint John the Baptist, but the mother of Saint Anne, and thus the grandmother of the Virgin and great-grandmother of Jesus Christ. Right? She is said to have lived a life of exceptional piety as a wife first, and then as a widow. She is so blessed that she can actually work her own miracle of loaves and fishes in the hospice that she founds and retires to, which bears a kind of uncanny resemblance, not just to nunneries, but also to the kind of lay communities of women in Florence of the 14th and 15th century, right? The manuscripts say that then finally God called her to paradise, and so the Virgin Mary and Jesus were called to her bedside along with the 12 disciples and Mary Magdalene, Mary Salome, and Mary Cleophas, on whom more in a bit. So this story clearly struck a chord with women and men in Renaissance Florence, and has been connected by Dr. Lawless as well as Dr. Mussig at the University of Bristol with a model for older women, especially for the service role and the hospitality that older women could give both in and outside of the church in that era. Now, it's worth noting just in passing, however, as well, that a church in Malta of Our Lady Mary of Liesse also honors a Saint Ismeria, but she is not Ismeria, the great-grandmother. She is a certain Ismeria of Cairo, who in another vernacular medieval epic actually converted to Christianity in order to rescue imprisoned Christian knight crusaders and take them back home to France, where she eventually founded a church and lived happily ever after. So there's at least two Ismerias out there in the Christian traditions. Okay, so what about great Granny Ismeria then? She is the progenitor of many women, especially of Elizabeth, who we've already mentioned, but also of her daughter Anne. Now, Jesus' grandmother, Anna, or Anne, or Hannah, is not actually named in the Bible as we have it, but in the Proto-Evangelium of James, she is said to be the wife of a certain Joachim, and there is an enormously long story all about their difficulties in conceiving. based, of course, partly on going all the way back to Abraham and Sarah, and then forward in time to Hannah, mother of Samuel, and then forward again, of course, to where we've just heard about Elizabeth and Zachariah. Now, Anna and Joachim do manage to conceive Mary, but they also offer her to the temple, and as they are instructed to do. And then she actually has all sorts of devout Jewish female activities that she carries on there as she goes up to age 12 and then has to leave at puberty and acquires Joseph actually as her sort of foster father rather than husband. And eventually the story, of course, ends in this case with Mary very much still alive, but being looked after by St. John, the beloved disciple. So Mary's mother, St. Anne, has had a very fertile afterlife beyond the Proto-Evangelium. She has many churches devoted to her across both Eastern and Western Christianity. The Normans consecrated this, their first church, at the Grand Harbor Fortress of Malta, to St. Anne, Mother of Mary. And this church also then was rebuilt by the Knights of St. John when they arrived in Malta and rededicated to Anne and Mary with this fantastic ancient granite column, which has been possibly either on Malta from Egypt in antiquity or brought here by the Knights. This church today is still in the use of the Knights of St. John. And then just below it in the fortress, the Castel St. Angelo, the main harbor fortress of Malta, there's also a secondary chapel of St. Anna, or St. Anne, which has this really wonderful modern altarpiece that's been recently placed there in honor of both St. Anne and her daughter Mary, Mother of Jesus. So now I've come to the most abundant section, I would say, of our traditions. In the Gospels as well as elsewhere. The Gospels of St. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John speak of many Marys as well as Salome and others who are wives of various men attending to Jesus both before and after his entombment in Jerusalem. They are, as I said before, something like aunties, as we might understand them, but they're also fulfilling a really important role around the proper treatment of the body of the dead, especially of the dead who is a relative in this era of Second Temple Judaism. There's Mary's and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. There's Mary's and Salome, and sort of untangling these different traditions is quite a feat. But clearly, in early Christianity, these women were very, very important. They were kinswomen of various kinds, but they were also disciples and hence religious kinswomen already. Because of their relationship with Jesus during his life and during his ministry and teachings. And we can tell how important they were because we have very, very few depictions of crucifixion in early Christian art. But some of our earliest Christian art, that is particularly the frescoes painted in the Dura Europos house church around about the year 235 or so. They give a very prominent location to at least two women, coming to the tomb of Jesus, right alongside the story found in all the Gospels of him walking on water. Now, the Dura Europos, early to mid 3rd century house church is by far our best piece of evidence before the catacombs for Christian iconography. It included places for assembly, for training of catechumens, and this baptistry. And it was right at the baptistry, next to the font, that this scene was placed. You can see that Jesus' tomb is pictured as a sarcophagus, a kind of traditional sarcophagus with a star here, and that at least 2 women, 1, 2, to the right, are approaching this sarcophagus. Right. So who are these women who were so attentive to Jesus Christ before his death, and also are witnesses to his resurrection, and are the first to spread the word of his resurrection? As we can see, well, Matthew, he speaks of the mother of James and John, the wife of Zebedee, who at 20:20 asks for them to sit beside Jesus in heaven. And Jesus says it's a very bitter cup that he will drink, but he can share it with them. But the most important thing about the disciples and about Christianity is that it will be not like the Roman Empire, that everyone will be equal and everyone will share with one another. So she reappears then among the many women who were watching the crucifixion from a distance, and they had followed Jesus from Galilee and ministered to him. She is there alongside Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. So there are therefore in Matthew 2 Marys and a mother of the sons of Zebedee, that is, mother of James and John, probably wife of Zebedee. She who was later interpreted as perhaps aunt by being married to brother of Joseph, or being an auntie by being a sister of Joseph. Right. So, however, on the other hand, in John, well, in Matthew and in Mark, but also then in John, we get slightly different versions of the before and after the crucifixion. We find that beforehand, besides the cross, there were Jesus' mother Mary, his mother's sister Mary, wife of Clophas, and Mary Magdalene. So if Mary is sister of Mary and wife of Clophas, then she can't be the mother of Zebedee, but she can perhaps be the mother of James and Joseph.
Thank you.
And finally, then we come to Luke and his version of what happened. That is, that there was a certain lady named Joanna, and she was also with Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, at the tomb. So all of these different versions seem to have been coalesced or combined, as it were, by the artists of the early Christian church. There are usually just 2 Marys, or let's say 2 women, 2 followers of Jesus, 2 female followers of Jesus, and probably, other than Mary Magdalene, kinswoman, either by marriage or by blood. If there are more, 3 or 4, then this did not make it into the dominant art historical tradition. But what did make it into the tradition was that these women came very early on the morning of the 3rd day. They came early to the tomb, and that was the first day of the week for the Jewish calendar, the day after the Sabbath. And so it was that day that then Christianity decided to dedicate Sunday, rededicate to Kyriaki in Greek, or to the Lord's Day. They came also ready to do the anointing of the body. As you can see, they're holding these vessels for myrrh and aromatic oils and frankincense and herbs, and the kind of ointments that were used to anoint the dead before burial. They are also ready with their torches to be very early on in the morning. They're there at first light, right, at dawn of that Sunday of the 3rd day, since Jesus had been put into the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, or an empty tomb anyway, of Golgotha and the garden on the west side of Jerusalem. And they are there to do what women of the family need to do. That is to look after the mourning and the funeral of the dead. And they would return in general at a fixed amount of times past the person's burial. But in this case, in each of the 4 Gospels, something slightly different happens. But in each case, they are the first to see either the angels or Jesus or both, and to be told that he is coming back in Galilee and that he is coming back to bring his kingdom. Now, just in conclusion, I also want to share with you this amazing place, which is on the coast of France, and which at least 3 Marys, along with their maid Sarah, are said to have been miraculously transported to from Jerusalem in the time after the resurrection of Jesus and after the encounter at the tomb. This is a church known as Sainte Marie de la Mer, the Saints Mary of the Sea, showing that they are multiple. And up to the present day, since at least the 5th or 6th century, their legend has been perpetuated as saviors of sailors and seafarers, and both the French of the region and also the Gypsies or Romani of the region too, who particularly identify with the maid Sarah, who is often shown with a darker skin than the Marys themselves. So these Marys, along with Ismaria, Elizabeth, Anne, and of course the Virgin Mary herself, they have spread through literature and through pictures. They have played a really key role in the development of Christian art, literature, and ancient to modern societies. Right? These are stories from the stories of the Marys at the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem to St. Anne in Malta, from the contemporary Roman Empire to the French medieval coast. Jesus Christ's family clearly included women making a difference in their world and in the world of those who read about them and heard about them and saw the evidence of their wisdom, miracles, and life stories. Thank you very much.
Well, that was amazing, Amelia. Absolutely stunning. What a perfect introduction to the theme.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be very happy to answer any questions, although I must admit that I'm stronger on the archaeological and art historical evidence than trying to figure out, who was exactly related how to whom. But I think clearly it was a wonderful source of power and authority, both for women and for the family of Jesus, and that it's also been reinterpreted in various ways over the years. That the idea that his kinswomen have something special to offer.
Well, that was. I'm sure Don wants to say something. That was exactly what we had in mind when we put this conference topic up, to explore that topic. Right. Sorry, Don.
Yeah. Did you hear what I said about the family tree?
Oh,
no,
I didn't.
You need to go to Ancestry and try and work out the family tree.
Yes.
With all the Marys and everyone else, yes.
Absolutely.
So anyone that's got any questions? Can people
I do. Yes, I can. Rosemary.
Hi, Rosemary.
Hi, Amelia.
Mm.
I also have that. I can't see you anymore. That's all right. Something happened. I also have that photo of those women at the tomb.
Yes.
If you have also seen Joan Taylor investigating that and saying that it's a fragment of a procession of women. Something to have a look at, because it has been interpreted just as you have said it, and then she added more things into the pipeline, including their white veils that they are candle and a procession to baptism. So anyway, something really interesting to say.
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm saying. So I've thoroughly enjoyed your kinswoman, but thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm so glad to hear that, because I really want to look into that more, and I've never been able to see it in person.
No.
But I'd love to see it in person. That fresco.
Me too. Thank you.
I don't know, Don or Leslie might be able to say. I think this is a record audience. I've been trying to count them on my gallery view. I think this is the biggest Zoom we've ever had.
I think so. We had 39 at the beginning.
Oh. Yes. This isn't really a question, but I'll just add something in. As you know, I spend quite a bit of time on Norfolk Island, where my husband's got relatives, and it's exactly like that. Everybody's an auntie, and they're all related, and it doesn't matter how they're related, because they're an auntie no matter what. You can refer to your second cousin's mother as your auntie, and so everybody who's related to an islander has everybody's a cousin or an auntie, and I think that does make such sense in small communities. They must have all been related. I love to hear the way you tease that out, but it's pretty clear, isn't it, that all the people that Jesus mixed with, and unless he went to quite a faraway place, were all relations. And I don't know what you think about this. I think some of those early traditions that are preserved particularly in Eastern Christianity, have a lot behind. They have a lot of artistic tradition. They've got literary traditions behind them, and I think we in Western societies tend to, sniff at them, but only because we don't recognise just how interconnected and the strength of the traditions. I don't know what you think.
Definitely, definitely. I know I agree very much. I think especially in Hellenistic Judaism, they took family very seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of evidence, both literary and epigraphic, that they, did document their family trees and their descent lines, and that people married very much within the family group and within the tribe, and also that this was more of a characteristic too of Semitic peoples, because, for example, here in Malta, when you have a Greek inscription, it just says so and so, son of so and so. But if it's a Punic or Phoenician inscription, it says so and so, son of so and so, son of so and so, son of so and so, and it goes back a lot farther. So there was that interest in descent and in communities of descent, but I think also in different kinds of aunties and uncles and ways of referring to family that were being translated from Aramaic and into Greek, and that were part of the kind of Hellenistic Judaism of the wider diaspora, for sure, and the way that they related to each other.
Yes, and also you brought up the traditional role of women too, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, and that was very different from all the surrounding cultures, in many ways. But had its similarities too.
I should.
Can I ask Amelia if you're calling somebody the auntie?
Yes.
That's why they have all the various generations, because that auntie wouldn't be like an honorary auntie. Like, for instance, a friend of my husband's was always called Uncle Frank by my children, but absolutely no relationship whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that almost all of these women, they were either the sisters of Jesus' parents or grandparents, or they were married to the brothers of Jesus' parents or grandparents. So they were actual aunties.
Rather than
Either.
honorary. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah.
Amelia, when did
I think Sonia
is
has her hand up too, by the way.
I can't see.
Yes. Hi guys, can you hear me?
Who's
Yes.
it?
Oh,
Who's-
fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm in Christchurch. Fantastic talk, Amelia. Thank you so
Great.
much.
You're welcome.
Quick question. Does the fact that Judaism is matrilinear, and I'm assuming that was the case back then as well, add any strength to your argument in terms of women being having a certain power, or obviously, they've got power through exercising ritual, keeping the dead, etc. But does that come into play at all?
Well, I think it does, but I'm not enough of an expert to really say when things changed, because there is definitely descent from both the male and female line, which is very important in the tribes of Israel. And then there is King Herod, who gets in trouble for having a non-Jewish mother and a non-Jewish father.
Right.
So clearly descent is important in Second Temple Judaism. But when these kind of more, let's say, medieval to modern ideas about Judaism passing through the mother but not the father come into play, I don't actually know.
Oh, thank you. No, that's interesting. I'm like you. I'm more of an archaeological art historian background to this.
Yeah.
So thanks. Very interesting.
You're welcome. And Don, you had a question?
Yes, I was just wondering, when did Ismeria come into the whole story? In what century was?
Yeah. So the earliest that she's the great grandmother is the 14th century, so it's relatively modern.
Yeah.
But she appears apparently earlier in things like the Golden Legend, as a kinswoman, or an auntie rather. It's only in the 14th century that this Italian woman or man, it's an anonymous text, and there are two versions of it, and so it probably goes back to maybe 13th or 14th century, and it seems to be specifically Florentine, calling her the great grandmother, and elaborating on a kind of combination of Jesus and Mary and Elizabeth and Anne, to kind of come up with this new story. But her story is special because it's an older woman's story. It's about her as a widow. And so in that way, it does draw a little bit on Anna the prophetess, right? Who's only in John, who's at the temple, and has been a widow for many years, and can kind of work her own sort of miracles when she's in the presence of Jesus.
Right.
Of the Lord, let's say God. Yeah.
It just seems very late, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that's a story of ancient history, that there are lots of gaps. Lots of gaps.
I was impressed with how early the story of the Marys coming to the coast of France was. They have quite good inscriptions and things going back to, like, late Roman Visigothic era, that they had this legend very early on anyway, that these Marys had all gotten aboard a ship and come over and just happened to choose there to settle.
Yes, don't say that in Ephesus.
I can't hear you, Alana. Alana, you need to unmute.
Getting back to what you said about them all being aunties and cousins, it also makes really good sense with keeping the property in the family, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean,
that's
behind the.
Exactly.
I mean, that's obviously much further back. That's the story of Boaz and Ruth and so on. The whole idea was to keep Elimelech's property. Well, most of the idea was to keep Elimelech's property where it ought to be, wasn't it?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah,
no,
so
it was.
It all goes back to. Yeah.
Yes. Very much. Very much.
So what you said just fits very much in, as far as I can see, from my ignorance of Middle Eastern society, into Middle Eastern. Into small communities. I mean, let's face it, they have to marry each other. They don't meet anybody else. It's weird.
Everybody knows. Yes, everybody.
It's strange
if you see. Yes, if you see a stranger at Xenos, it's unusual, right?
Yeah, you're not going to marry them, are you? And leave leave everything unless you're dragged away like Helen.
Well, yes, but I mean, property-wise and also agricultural-wise, it's really important, because you need a certain amount of trees, right? You need a certain amount of olive trees in order to make oil for your family. You need a certain size vineyard in order to make wine. And so you can't have the property be cut up and cut up and cut up. It's not sustainable, right? So it was very important, I think, both in all of the different Semitic societies, but also in Greece and even in Italy, to keep the family property, especially in these small towns and villages, to keep that family property together, so that it could be farmed and all by the next generations of cousins. Any other questions?
Oh, just a little comment, if I make it so interesting. Paul may be able to comment on this, but I was reading, I think in Craig Keener's wife's story, that in African society, at least where his wife came from, it wasn't even the oldest son who inherited the land of it was the oldest male cousin, which of course did lead to a lot of feuds, or does lead to a lot of feuds and so on. But that again makes sense. It's the oldest male cousin that gets it, not the oldest son. I don't know. Paul would know more. He knows.
It's different in different regions of Malawi. So this is even within Malawi. There's not a single way of doing this, but the majority and inheriting land in Malawi is another issue altogether. But with village headships, chieftaincies, in the majority of Malawi, the situation is that when the old chief dies, the right to nominate the next chief belongs to the Mbumba, that's to say the matrilineage group. So his mother and wife and daughters and whoever, the matrilineage group in the village gets together, and women don't become chiefs. This is the 21st century, so there are exceptions, of course. But the deal is that the matrilineage group decides on a person who's of suitable age and character and skills, and a member of the family to take on a village headmanship or a chieftaincy or whatever it is. And then, because again it's the 20th century, 21st century, the government has a role in this too, and so the ladies tell the government who they want, and the government endorses him and gives him a little salary, and so that's how chieftaincies pass in Malawi.
In Egypt, in the 1st to the 3rd century, as far as I went, in the wills, people got an eighth of a house, a quarter of a house. It was so they just got bits of the house. It didn't mention property at all. So much land. Some land was divided up between the children. Yeah.
Amelia, I have a question. My
Sure.
name's Linda. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm interested in how Jesus seemed to reject his family relations, and he created this sort of fictitious sort of kinship thing with his followers. Was this a unique thing he did, or was that something that figures did at the time in Judaism or in the Mediterranean area?
This is something that has attracted a lot of scholarship, and it was actually something that was very common in both in Judaism, but also in the surrounding Eastern Mediterranean societies, that people would join fraternities, as it were, or sororities, or mystery cults, or some other sort of devotional activity. Often it's a kind of combination of philosophy and religion. And then they would refer to those people as their brothers and sisters. I mean, it is a little unusual to so strongly leave behind the natal family, as he expresses it, in each of the Gospels. But it is a common occurrence in many other kinds of societies, groups, and clubs. I think of, for example, we have the Derveni Papyrus, which talks about Orphic religion and the Orphic hymns, and gives analysis of the Orphic hymns. This is a burned papyrus of about circa 300 BC, found on a bier of a funeral pyre, Derveni, just north of Thessaloniki. So it would be, and that papyrus definitely talks about the group and the group's, brothers and sisters who are the ones who know the truth about Zeus and about the cosmos, and they are, already kind of getting together. And then I also think of Mithraism. In Mithraism, the different levels of men in that initiatory, let's say religion, they referred to each other as fathers and sons, and then as also as brothers, depending on kind of what level they were at that in there. So yeah, it's pretty common, but it is also unusual that he also rejects, his mother and brothers so strongly, and that his group, like Epicurus's garden, it was unusual, including men and women in it as well, which was kind of unusual at the time.
Thanks, Amelia.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you, Amelia, for that intriguing paper, and it whets our appetite for Saturday as well, and the papers that will be given there. So, and if you haven't registered for Saturday, there's still time, and you can actually do it on the day. We're starting at 8:30 for registration, and we kick off with the papers at 9:00. So,
well, Karen has very helpfully booked a bit extra food in case the only thing is if you do want to have free parking, you have to let Karen know by 2 p.m. Friday. Other than that, you can just rock up.
Yeah.
We'll come by.